Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever been somewhere so dark and quiet, you feel like something is lurking just out of sight? Tonight, I have 3 spine-chilling stories that will make you rethink the places you visit. First, a graffiti artist's night at an abandoned train yard turns terrifying when someone starts stalking him from the shadows. In the second story, Jake's train-hopping adventure in an eerie tunnel takes a deadly turn. And in the third, James finds himself alone in a subway station, but when a child's voice calls out from the darkness, he realizes not everything in the shadows is as it seems. What would you do if you found yourself in their shoes? Let's dive in. My name's Dylan, and if you ask the local police, they'd probably call me a delinquent. I prefer the term graffiti artist. The labels don't matter when night falls, and my spray cans whisper promises of creativity. My best friend Ethan doesn't paint the just tags along, partly for company, mostly to calm my nerves. Tonight was different though. I'd stumbled upon something hidden on Google Maps. An abandoned railway deep on the outskirts of Cincinnati. Forgotten train cars, rotting and silent, waited patiently beneath twisted branches, swallowed by weeds and shadows. It was exactly what I needed, no interruptions. No cops, just pure artistic solitude. But from the moment we arrived, something felt wrong. The cold July air clung to us, unusually still, carrying the faint metallic scent of rust. Ethan lit up a joint, oblivious to my growing unease. But as I stepped closer to the waiting darkness, I couldn't shake the sensation we weren't alone. We moved carefully along the overgrown tracks, the gravel crunching beneath our sneakers. My flashlight swept across each rusted train car, revealing untouched canvases waiting for my mark. It was thrilling, yet unsettling. No graffiti, no sign of human activity, nothing but cold metal staring blankly back at us. Ethan exhaled a cloud of smoke, his laughter echoing weakly before dying in the eerie stillness. "Creepy spot, Dylan," he muttered. I nodded silently, grabbing a spray can and shaking it, trying to ignore the creeping sensation crawling up my spine. I approached the first car, paint hissing softly into the silence. But as colors spilled onto the metal, the air grew colder, heavier, as if the night itself disapproved. Behind me, Ethan shuffled nervously. "You hear that?" he whispered sharply. I froze, heart pounding like a drum. I strained my ears, but all that greeted me was deafening, silencing, unnatural, quiet, thick, and suffocating. Whatever Ethan had heard, I feared it was closer than either of us realized. I quickly finished the first piece and moved to the next train car, adrenaline urging me to hurry. My hands trembled slightly as I painted, each stroke somehow less confident than the last. Ethan lingered near, nervously puffing a cigarette. The smoke drifted upward, dissolving into the unnatural silence. Finally completing my third tag, I tossed an empty spray can behind us, savoring the hollow metallic clang as it echoed into the darkness. But the echo didn't fade. Naturally, it was answered. A sudden, sharp metallic clang reverberated from somewhere deep behind the train cars. My breath caught in my throat. Ethan's eye widened with primal fear. We stood paralyzed, staring into the pitch-black void that surrounded us, searching for movement, straining to hear anything besides our ragged breaths. Then, from somewhere within that suffocating darkness, a low, guttural whisper carried toward us, barely audible but unmistakably hostile. "You shouldn't be here." I felt my blood freeze, realizing in terror we weren't alone. Before I could move, something flew past USA spray can I'd discarded moments earlier, landing violently at Ethan's feet. Panic exploded through my veins. A harsh voice roared from the darkness, raspy and unhinged. "You're gonna regret this." "Run!" Ethan screamed, turning instantly and sprinting down the gravel path. I stumbled after him, heart hammering painfully in my chest. Footsteps thundered behind us, heavy and relentless. The stranger's breaths rasped, disturbingly close, as the air filled with a suffocating dread. Then a deafening blast pierced the night. A gunshot echoed like thunder, shattering the silence. Ethan tripped, nearly collapsing, but managed to keep moving forward. My phone slipped from my sweaty hands, cutting off the frantic recording I'd attempted to capture as proof. We raced blindly, lungs burning, until the railroad tracks intersected a main road, illuminated faintly by distant streetlights. Only then did we dare glance back into the darkness behind us. There was nothing, just oppressive silence, and the sinister certainty that whoever pursued us was still watching, hidden in the shadows. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night still haunted me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Questions gnawed endlessly at my mind. Finally, I made a choice, armed myself with my Glock 19, and drove back to those cursed tracks, this time in broad daylight. Sunlight barely eased my nerves as I approached the abandoned railway once again. As soon as I reached the cars, a chill crawled up my spine. My colorful tags were no longer visible. Someone had deliberately smeared blotches of deep red paint across them, jagged and aggressive, like bloody warnings. My stomach twisted as dread seeped through me. Whoever pursued us clearly intended to erase any sign of our presence. Cautiously, I scanned the silent, empty surroundings, gripping my weapon tightly, feeling its weight as reassurance. Then, I spotted something disturbing further ahead, a single train car with its door swung wide open, dark and inviting, like an open mouth waiting to swallow me whole. Summoning my courage, I stepped toward it, every instinct screaming at me to turn and flee. Heart pounding, I climbed into the open train car, immediately overwhelmed by a sharp, nauseating stench of bleach, thick enough to choke on. My eyes watered, adjusting slowly to the dim interior. In the center sat a lone, battered chair, grotesquely positioned as if waiting for an unwilling occupant. Surrounding it were coils of frayed rope, scattered chains, and what looked disturbingly like restraints bolted into the rust-stained floor. A surge of cold dread rippled down my spine. I moved cautiously, footsteps echoing like whispers against the metal walls. The realization hit me brutally. This wasn't some homeless refuge. This was a place designed for suffering, deliberately hidden away from prying eyes. My trembling hand reached for my phone, desperate to document this nightmare, when suddenly, a faint metallic clang echoed from deep within the shadows behind me, sharp, deliberate, and infinitely menacing. I spun around, breath hitching sharply, feeling the suffocating presence of eyes watching me from the shadows. Panic surged violently within me. There was no doubt now. I had stepped directly into the lair of the monster who chased us that night. I didn't hesitate another second. Heart hammering like a frantic drumbeat, I bolted out of the train car, stumbling onto the gravel below. My legs felt like lead, but pure terror propelled me forward. Behind me, another clang, louder, angry air echoed through the abandoned railway, followed by a low, distorted chuckle, drifting ominously in my direction. I sprinted until my lungs burned, refusing to glance back, knowing any hesitation could mean my end. Only when I reached my car and slammed the door shut did I allow myself a fearful glance toward the tracks. Nothing moved, nothing emerged yet. The oppressive feeling of being watched lingered like a sinister promise. Even now, late at night, that twisted laughter still echoes in my mind. Whatever horrors I uncovered, whoever pursued us, I'm certain they're still out there, lurking patiently in the shadows, guarding their terrible secret, waiting for someone else to stumble blindly into their trap. My name's Jake Turner. I hadn't been home in years, and honestly, I hadn't planned to come back. But that summer, right before a big move to Canada, I had no choice but to spend a week in Boise, Idaho alone, restless, and already counting the days until I could leave. Most of my old friends were long gone, and the town felt smaller than I remembered. I tried hiking, driving scenic routes, watching movies. Nothing helped. I was bored, uneasy. That dangerous kind of quiet where your past starts whispering again. On my last day, I gave into a stupid itch, an old habit I thought I'd buried. Train hopping. One last reckless thrill, just for the nostalgia. I found a remote set of tracks deep in the forest, and told myself it'd be harmless. Just a quick ride through the tunnel, in and out. But the forest doesn't forget, and neither does whatever watches from the dark. The tracks were buried deep in the sawtooth wilderness, twisting through thick pine, moss-covered boulders, and endless silence. It was the kind of place locals whispered about, but never really visited. I parked off a gravel road, out of sight, and trekked down the embankment until the rails emerged from the trees, like a forgotten scar. A long, dark tunnel sat just ahead, its mouth wide open like it was waiting. Beyond that, I knew, was an old wooden bridge suspended over a river gorge. I had no plans to cross it. My goal was simple. Hop a freight car, ride it through the tunnel, then jump off. Nothing more. The sun was high, the air still. Not a single bird, not a single breeze. I sat by the tracks and waited. When the first vibration hit the ground beneath me, I stood up slowly, heart pounding not with excitement, but with something I hadn't felt in years. Dread. The train rumbled closer, a hulking snake of rust and screeching metal. I stayed low in the brush, waiting for the right caron with a ladder, one I could grab easily. When it passed, I broke into a sprint, boots pounding the gravel. I latched on, hoisted myself up, and settled into the side rail just as the train entered the tunnel. That's when I saw it. A quick, unnatural flash, deep ahead white, like a flicker of lightning. It vanished almost instantly, swallowed by the black. I blinked hard, trying to make sense of it. A spark, a reflection, then something grabbed my leg. Cold fingers, calloused and tight, wrapped around my ankle. I shouted, nearly slipping off the ladder. Kicking wildly, I caught nothing but air. The grip released, but not for long. A second hand slapped my shin. Harder, more forceful. My body locked up with pure panic. There was someone or something in that tunnel, inches from me. And I was moving deeper into the dark with nowhere to go. The train didn't stop, and neither did whatever was reaching for me from the shadows. The moment the train burst out of the tunnel, I didn't think I jumped. I hit the rocky ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact, lungs burning and heart thrashing like a war drum. My knees were scraped raw, palms cut open, but I didn't care. I was alive. I stumbled to my feet and looked back. The train roared away, heading across the bridge I had no intention of crossing. I stood alone in a small clearing, surrounded by forest and silence. Then it hit me. The car was on the other side of that tunnel. Panic surged like ice through my chest. I glanced at the bridge, a narrow wooden crossing suspended over a jagged gorge. If a train came while I was on it, I'd have nowhere to run. Certain death. The tunnel, though, was worse. Whatever had grabbed me was still in there. I knew it. I felt it. And now, I had to go back through it alone, on foot, in pitch-black silence. I sat down on a tree stump, shaking. For the first time in years, I felt truly trapped. Not by the forest, but by something in it that didn't want me to leave. I stood at the mouth of the tunnel, staring into the black void. My feet refused to move. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but I had nowhere to go. So I did. The only thing I could think of. I pulled out my phone, turned the volume all the way up, and opened a YouTube video I downloaded years ago for a short film, a gunshot sound effect. "Stay back," I shouted into the dark, my voice bouncing off the stone. "I'm armed." I hit play. The gunshot echoed like thunder down the tunnel, startling even me. The reverb shook the air, swallowing everything in one long booming blast. Silence. No footsteps, no breathing, no whispers. The clicking I'd heard earlier, gone. My bluff had worked, or at least I thought it had. But standing there in that crushing silence was somehow worse. Because now, I wasn't sure if it was fear keeping them still, or if they were waiting for me to come closer. I stepped into the tunnel. The air shifted, instantly cold, damp, heavy with the stench of mold and rust. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I pushed forward, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. Each step felt like a countdown. Halfway in, I dared to glance back. Nothing, just blackness swallowing the entrance I'd come from. Then I saw them. Two silhouettes, standing motionless on the tracks behind me, backlit by the faint light of the tunnel's opening. Tall, still, watching. They hadn't made a sound, no footsteps, no shuffle. Just appeared. I froze mid-step. My throat tightened. I could feel their attention, even from a distance, like invisible fingers brushing across my skin. I took a single step backward, and that's when I heard it. A screech. Not an animal, not a voice. Something inhuman, twisted, wet, like a scream being pulled through a throat not meant to scream. It echoed through the tunnel like it came from the walls themselves, surrounding me, pushing me forward. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe. I just ran, knowing whatever was back there wasn't just watching anymore. It was following. I didn't stop running until the tunnel was behind me. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but I kept pushing forward, the sound of that grotesque screech still ringing in my ears. When I reached the other side of the tunnel, I stumbled into the open air, gasping for breath, desperately searching for the faintest sign of safety. The forest was eerily quiet now. No sounds of Lafino wind, no birds, nothing. I dared to look back at the tunnel, my chest tight with fear. There were no figures in sight, no shadows moving on the tracks. But the feeling of being watched was suffocating. I ran to the edge of the cliff, my heart pounding against my ribs, and that's when it hit me. I was safe, but I wasn't really in the tunnel, and I'd never be the same. My name is James Mitchell. I've been working as a maintenance technician for the MTA in New York City for over 7 years. Most of the time, it's a job that requires no thinking, just routine, repairing tracks, and maintaining the stations. The bustling, chaotic city usually overshadows everything else. But not tonight. It was just another evening shift at High Street Station, a quiet station I rarely saw anyone use. At night, the platform would empty out, and the only sound would be the hum of the overhead lights and the occasional train passing. I'd gotten used to the eerie silence. Most workers did. But tonight was different. I had this nagging feeling, like something was off, as if the station itself was watching me. There were no trains expected to pass for hours, no passengers waiting in the shadows. Just the overwhelming stillness of an old, forgotten underground space. As I moved through the station, checking the rails, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I told myself it was just the exhaustion. But deep down, I knew. Something was waiting. Something had shifted in the air. The High Street Station was eerily quiet as usual, tucked away beneath the bustling streets of Brooklyn. The flickering fluorescent lights above cast long, distorted shadows, making the platform look like a forgotten relic of the past. The station had a certain history to I told, dilapidated, with the faint smell of mildew and dust in the air. Most people avoided it, especially at night. It wasn't the type of place you'd want to find yourself alone in. I moved slowly down the platform, my footsteps echoing off the cold concrete, the only sound in the stillness. The trains had stopped running for the night, leaving only the hum of the lights and the occasional rattle from the tracks. It was so quiet, it felt almost unnatural. There was a deep, unsettling silence that seemed to pulse in the air like the station was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like I was being watched. I continued my rounds, making sure everything was in order, but the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer than it should. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. Then, as I approached the tunnel entrance, I heard it. A loud, sharp clang like metal striking metal. It came from deep within the tunnel, a sound that was so out of place in the otherwise silent station. My heart jumped in my chest. I froze, straining to listen, but there was nothing after that. No footsteps, no rustling, just silence. I told myself it was probably just some debris shifting, maybe even a malfunction with the lights. But the feeling in my gut told me it was something else. Something deliberate. I stepped toward the tunnel entrance, the beam from my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The train tracks were empty, as they should be, but something about the shadows beyond seemed wrong. I called out, trying to convince myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. "Hello?" I shouted, my voice breaking through the silence. No answer. Just that lingering sense of being watched. And then, to my horror, I heard it again, another clang, this time closer. I took a cautious step toward the tunnel, the light from my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but something was pulling me forward. I had to know what was making that noise. I had to know what was lurking in the darkness. As I stepped closer to the tunnel's mouth, the clanging stopped. A sudden, eerie silence followed, hanging heavy in the air. I called out again, trying to reassure myself. "Is anyone there?" I asked, my voice echoing through the tunnel. Nothing. And then a voice. It was soft at first, almost like a whisper, but it was unmistakable. A child's voice calling out for help. "Help, please." My heart skipped a beat. The voice sounded so real, so desperate. It came from somewhere deep in the tunnel, and it sounded like it was right in front of me, even though I couldn't see a thing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. "Where are you?" I asked, stepping closer, my flashlight flickering nervously. I waited for a response, my throat tightening. "Just keep walking," the voice answered. It was too calm, too rehearsed. My breath caught. That voice wasn't asking for help, it was guiding me. My pulse raced, my legs frozen in place as I stood at the edge of the tunnel, the faint glow of my flashlight casting eerie shadows across the tracks. I didn't know why, but every fiber of my being told me that something was wrong. That voice sounding so innocent, so pleading felt like a trap. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to find out, that I needed to know who or what was behind that voice. I took another step forward, cautiously, as if the very ground might betray me. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, the darkness swallowing everything in its path. But the voice came again, low and clear. "Just keep walking," it repeated. But this time, there was a strange, almost unnatural calmness in its tone, a haunting quality that set my nerves on edge. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice breaking through the silence, demanding answers. A long pause followed. Then, a faint rustling sound from deeper within the tunnel, like footsteps shifting on gravel. I didn't wait for another answer. Something was coming, something close, and I was standing directly in its path. Suddenly, the cold air around me felt heavier, pressing in as if the tunnel itself were closing in on me. I turned to run, but before I could move, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind me, quick, purposeful, and getting closer. I didn't look back. My feet moved faster than they ever had before, slamming against the cold concrete as I sprinted through the tunnel. My breath came in shallow gasps, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. But the footsteps behind me, those footsteps were unmistakable. They were following me. I dared a quick glance over my shoulder. The beam from my flashlight flickered and bounced off the walls, but there was nothing there. No one. But I could feel them, the shadows, just beyond the edge of my vision, moving with me. Suddenly, a cold hand brushed against my shoulder. I screamed, stumbling forward, nearly tripping over my own feet. My mind screamed run, but my legs were betraying me. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness swallowing everything around me. Then another scream, this time from deep within the shadows. I was almost at the end, just a few more steps, when the laughter started. It wasn't human. I burst out of the tunnel, my legs burning with every step, desperate to get away from the haunting laughter that still echoed behind me. The fresh air hit me like a shock, but it wasn't enough to shake off the feeling that something was still chasing me, something far worse than I could ever imagine. I didn't stop running until I reached the street, gasping for breath, my hands shaking. The city was alive around Meckers, passing, lights shining, but I couldn't shake the suffocating silence that had followed me out of the tunnel. I turned back, half expecting to see something emerge from the darkness, but there was nothing. Just the streetlights, casting long shadows on the pavement. I tried to calm myself. It was just my mind, I told myself. But I couldn't forget the look in those eyes I never saw, the laughter I couldn't explain. And as I stood there, I knew one thing for sure: I would never go back to that station. Well, that's it for tonight's terrifying tales. But now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation like one of these? Or maybe you've experienced something that you'd like to share? Drop your stories in the comments below. I'd love to read them, and maybe even tell your story in an upcoming video. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on the next creepy adventure. Stay safe out there. And remember, sometimes the shadows aren't as empty as they seem.